Hello, everybody. Welcome to this month's DeSimone Deals, the Exit Strategy podcast. As everyone knows, we talk about ways to help business owners prepare for a successful transition and exit out of their business. We bring on guests to share their insights on how they help their clients prepare for those events. This month, we have a guest. His name is Jon Chen. I've known him for many years through networking circles and work with clients in affinity groups. He's the founder and president of Blue Tide Catalyst. And welcome to the show. I will let you explain what you do and how you help your clients.
Great. Thank you, Greg. Thank you for having me on the show today. It's good to see you. I call myself a value accelerator, right? I help business owners accelerate and actually exponentially accelerate the value of the business. You might know the stat, 85% of businesses that go to market do not sell. And typically 80% of a business owner's assets are tied up in the business. So you have business owners who spend their entire lives building something and walk away with nothing. And my mission is to make sure that that doesn't happen.
So that's that. And this is a perfect alignment with why you're on this podcast. Is I think everyone defaults to, all right, when I'm ready to end this, I don't want to work my own retire. I'll just sell my business, collect my money, and everyone will be fat, dumb, and happy. Uh, but as your statistics point out, and my experience and conversations um, lead me to agree with these statistics, what are business owners missing? What are they missing with that mindset? Like they'll just be able to sell when they're ready to go. What should they be thinking instead?
Well, I think let's start with that first stat, right? The 85% of businesses that go to market do not sell. There's kind of two reasons largely for that, right? Number one is entrepreneurs are optimistic. I'm a former entrepreneur, five-time entrepreneur, six-time entrepreneur, and we're overly optimistic. We're optimistic. That's why we do what we do. And the problem is that we have overinflated sense of value of our business. There's nothing out there like a Zillow, very few things like a Zillow to give you a sense of what your business is worth. So you talk to your buddy, and buddy tells you that they sold their business for $40 million, and you think you can sell your business for $40 million. So people get a little disappointed at that point in time. The second thing is typically businesses are still highly dependent upon that owner, right? And nobody wants to buy a business where the owner walks out the door. So what I work with clients to do is to focus on what is going to make the company most valuable. How do you build a valuable company? Which is the process you can't do right before you're about to sell. It's a process that takes 3 to 5 years. In addition, I help them think through, what do you really need? Like, what's that exit really look like for you that you need to live your next life? And make sure that we're building the company to help you achieve that windfall to help fund what you need to do next.
So when you start the process, like how do you start it, and what are you looking for to find quick wins and long-term gains for your clients?
So I think the first thing I do is I start with value, right? Value accelerator. What is the current value of the business? I do have this, what I call Zillow level tool, right? Because, as with any asset, businesses will go sell for as much as anybody's willing to pay and sell for. So I can't nobody can really give you an accurate assessment of value, but to give you a range and a sense of where you are. And as exits are based upon multiples and helps you understand what the range of multiples might be and where you might fall into it. So I work with business owners first to understand what the current value of the business is and what the potential value of the business is. At the same time, I talk to them about and work with a wealth manager to understand what do they need to not have to work again, to live off the windfall from the business. So let's say you need $400,000 a year. Well, the typical number is 4%. You live off 4% of your windfall. So you need $10 million to live off $400,000 a year. And so I understand the value. Let's say the value of the business right now is $7 million, or roughly as we estimate it. Well, you need to be at least $13 million. So we help understand, we start at the end. What's the end goal, right? Then we work to get a strategy together to go from 7 to $13 million. So that's kind of where we start. It's like what the end is, where we need to get to, and put a strategy together to get there.
And what is the reception you typically see when you lay out what the value of the actual value or the or estimated, I shouldn't say actual, the estimated valuation range, which I like that you said range. Like when I talk to people that come in to bring their companies to market, they said, "What do you think it's worth?" I'm like, "Well, it's worth between 7 and 9 million, and here's the factors that would put it to the low end. Here's the factors that would put it to the high end." So I like the fact that you have that range and you can have that conversation with the client. But when you deliver that range, What is the initial reaction you typically get from clients or prospects?
To be frank, most of the time it's a lot lower than they think it was. Like I said, entrepreneurs were optimistic. It's a little bit of a reality check, and sometimes people get upset. But I also caveat it, right? Like it's let's not focus on the number, right? Because the analysis looks at what drives value, and let's focus on the things that drive value, right?
Mhm.
And you don't know what the situation is going to be like when you're ready to sell 3 years, 5 years. You don't know what the market's going to look like. You don't know what the industry is going to look like. You don't know who the buyer is going to be. And so it's really hard. What you want to build is a great business that somebody's going to want to buy. As an example, I focus on one of the most important things that I mentioned earlier is owner dependency, right? So, and let me also say a focus on value, right? I talked about the focus on value, right? So entrepreneurs are always focused on grow, 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 grow. But that, as you know, is not what drives value. You can have a high growth, high revenue company that nobody wants to buy for the reasons we talked about, the owner dependency, number one, and number two, because you have to have earnings, right? So a lot of companies have, growth, but if you don't have earnings, you're not going to need as much value. And so entrepreneurs often are focused on growth. So let's say, a fast growing company is maybe growing at 20, 30%. Like that's a stable growth rate, right? So if you're growing 20, 30% in revenue, you're growing 20 to 30% in EBITDA if you're good. And that means your value is growing 20 to 30% a year. But removing that owner dependency, and I'm sure you've seen this before, has a huge effect on the multiplier. I've seen numbers that says if remove the owner dependency where the company does not depend 100% on the owner, you're increasing the value by 2 to 3 times in the multiple range, right? So in 1 year, I can help remove the owner dependency and you're increasing the value of that company by 200 to 300%. So do you want to grow your value by 20 to 30%? Or you want to grow your company by 200 to 300%?
Mhm.
So the focus on value is the first thing, right? Let's understand what drives the value. And that's much more important, frankly, than that exact number. It gives you a sense, but build the best company you can. That's what I do with my clients, build an exceptional company, and that will drive the value when you're ready to sell.
So how do you get an owner to think where they've been successful relying on themselves to say, okay, to get to the next level, to get the valuation I want, I actually got to do less or
Right.
delegate more? How do you get that across to them? How do you get them to buy into it and accept it? Because that's, I think sometimes the ego gets involved. Like, no one's smarter than me. No one can do it like I want to do it. If you want it done right, I got to roll up my sleeves and do it. I lead from the front. How do you get past those mental blocks?
Right. I think, frankly, people buy when there's pain, right? When they have pain, people buy pain, right? And I think somebody needs to be at the point recognizing that they can't do it anymore. That takes self-reflection, awareness, and pain, right? And some of the conversations I have is, when's the last time you took 2 week vacation where you didn't check your email, right? Would you like that? A lot of times for people, it's about family. Like I'm not spending the time I want with my family, or I'm just working too hard. There is a little bit of like self-awareness and getting that point of that need, right? But it's again a question of what are you looking to do? Entrepreneurs start businesses because oftentimes they believe it's the path to freedom, but it actually ends up trapping them. So somebody's got to be at that point, I think, to realize that, if they're not there, sometimes it's just hard. And my job is not to convince them. My job is to help them when they see the aha moment, when they realize it.
Mhm. So owner dependency, I agree with you 100%. And in fact, the 200 to 300% increase might be a little bit low when you consider if you're too dependent, the value could be zero because you can't sell it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So
It's an
let's
infinite
assume they
return on
could sell
value.
it, but once you get past, we now can sell it, and then by removing the reliance and the dependency on the owner, you can accelerate that. So I understand that. I agree. That's probably one of the top ranking issues on increasing value. At least when I talk to clients, when I get them ready to go to, when I preparing them to go to market and I explain my valuation. You talked about growth and it's interesting you said because I do say that growth does help improve the value of the company, but you I think frame it correctly. It's not just top line growth. It's can you grow the business and it drops that growth drops to the bottom line, that you're getting commensurate growth in the bottom line and top line. And
Right,
I think a lot of owners think that they can grow their way into value, grow their way out of problems and not realizing it's profitable growth. How do
right.
you start to have those conversations, and how do you frame that conversation with an owner who's typically, if they're a sales, I've seen sales driven or say owners that have the sales mentality or from the sales background that think that getting the sale is the most important thing versus getting a profitable sale is more important. How do you break through that thought process?
Well, first of all, you hit on a quote I love is people love to say revenue solves a multitude of problems. It does, but it doesn't, right? Like it doesn't, growth
Yeah,
sometimes actually creates more problems. And there's a stat that every time you double your company, it increases by 12 times in complexity,
yeah.
right? It's pretty
Mhm.
significant. So, I think the numbers don't lie, right? First of all, as you know, when you're looking at value and sale of a business, it's about earnings. Like people, for some reason, still think that it's about revenue, right? And unless you're in a tech company, where it's a little bit different, right? Maybe it's about revenue, no profit. But most businesses that we're dealing with, people want to make money, right? When they're buying a company, they want to buy a company that makes money, unless they find some strategic way to unlock that EBITDA. But typically, if you have that EBITDA, people are going to want to pay more, and you can demand more for the business. So I think you start there, like help people understand how people really look at value, and it is about the earnings. And I also help them understand what earnings really looks like, because people actually have more earnings than they think they do, because business owners typically are passing so much through the business in terms of vacations and boats and cars and real estate, right? So that actually, so anybody looking out there, take that stuff out of your earnings, and you're going to have actually a lot higher earnings than you think you do, right? So that's the first thing. Um, the second thing is look, building a business and what people look at is not about growth, right? Studies after studies shows things like building customer diversity, right? So it's talking about, well, what are the metrics and what are the things that drive value, whether it be customer diversity or a strong culture or systems and processes, repeatability. Those are the things that actually drive value. And it's an education process. I actually believe my job is like, and my passion is about education now,
Mhm.
because like we know, like we just talked about at the beginning of the podcast, so many business owners are walking away with nothing. And I hate to see that happen. And when they get to you, frankly, it's too late. All right, unless they want to wait another couple of years to at least build more
Yeah,
value. And
correct.
so it's an educational process. I do a talk. Anybody wants to do it, I'm glad to, any of your listeners, I'll do a workshop to help them understand value and what the value of their business is. And it's an education process, and they've got to walk away to buy into it. And then I work with them to go about the process of building that value. But people need to understand this. It's an education thing. Business owners don't stop, take the time. Oftentimes, they're too busy to stop and understand and learn.
Well, you talked about growth creates complexity, and I've dealt with this many times in the past, even back in my corporate days. Um, Growing companies require a lot more capital. Growing
Mm-hmm.
companies require planning to be able to not cripple and bottleneck the company. If you have too much growth and your infrastructure and your systems and your people aren't prepared for it or have a system to handle the growth, the growth can crush you.
Right.
How do you deal with your clients or work with your clients to say, okay, um, we want to increase the value. We need to get like just kind of like you reversed engineered what the value had to be. Now it's okay. In order to get the valuation you want, we need to get your EBITDA to X level. In order to get EBITDA to X level, we got to either get more profitable with your existing business and or grow the top line and make sure that we're getting profitable. Um, the growth is profitable and it follows the bottom line. But again, that creates complexity. How do you leverage those all those different competing factors to help business owners set themselves up for long-term sustainable success that will continue on past a transaction?
Yeah, that's a great question. And frankly, I think I'm one of the few coaches that brings a holistic solution to the problem, right? Because some people who might be coming from a financial background are going to focus on the numbers and the bottom line and cost cutting, which is important. There's a lot of coaches out there. You're probably familiar with people who focus like scaling up and Rockefeller habits in the US, who are focused on the systems, to your point, on building great systems. But I think there's more than this, a holistic approach, right? Number one, as I mentioned, it starts with value, right? But the analogy I like to use, right, and you've probably seen me talk about this in some of our networking groups, is kids soccer, right? Do you remember when your kids played soccer? Your kids that played soccer,
Yes, well, a while ago, but I do remember it.
right? And what do they do when the whistle blows? They all swarm the ball, right? And they spend
Mhm,
the entire time swarming the ball all game long, right?
mhm.
And they just kind of go in this giant mess, swarm as I call it, from all across the field. You got kids who are going the wrong direction, playing with dandelions and screaming in the corner, right? And frankly, that's the way a lot of companies are, right? Many, small companies, mid-sized companies are just swarming from problem to problem, crisis to crisis, company saving deal to funding deal to you got to go, take care of this broken equipment. And frankly, some big companies do it too. I've been heard stories about Fortune 100 companies where the CEO is on the floor when a machine broke, right? So people swarm from problem to problem, crisis to crisis. Adding more people to that mess doesn't solve the problem, right? You need, you think about a professional soccer team or a high school soccer team, they start to play positions and roles, and people have their own metrics of like, what does success look like for me? How many goals have I blocked? How many goals have I kicked? And you need those systems. And a lot of people focus on the systems, to your point, right? Um, at the same time, what wins the gold medal of hockey, right? And or if you've ever watched Ted Lasso or any Kevin Costner movie from the 80s, it's not about the systems alone, right? It is about heart, it's about soul. It's about getting a team that's aligned and passionate about something greater than themselves and working well as a team. And so I do both, right? I do both. I help build the systems, but at the end of the day, a lot of owners struggle with they say people don't get it. They're not. I struggle with accountability. That's a big problem people struggle with. And a lot of people try to apply systems that drive greater control. But what you really want to do is unlock people and empower people and flip the organization upside down, right? Where people are not supporting you, flip the pyramid upside down where people are not supporting you, but you're supporting people, right? And and that's what I help people do is help unleash the potential of the people in an organization. Because when you do that, you get more engaged people, you get people who love the company. You actually, the statistics show that you have higher earnings, you have higher revenue, and you have more innovation, right? So that's kind of the holistic approach to like turning things around. And then the final thing is uh, well, the next thing is actually creating a place that customers are rabid about. They love you so much. And how do you unleash that customer relationship so customers are rabid about you is another differentiator that most other people don't focus on. So I'm focusing on that value. And I didn't talk about just kind of a clear, compelling strategy that people will get excited about, that culture, and then the customer.
So when you're building culture, a lot of people talk about it, and I know that owners sometimes struggle, like particularly the more blue collar type businesses versus more of a professional business. When you say I want to unlock their potential, I want to give them a responsibility and authority and autonomy. That's sometimes hard for the blue collar type owner. How do you break through that? Because your statistics talking about companies with that engagement, that culture are more profitable, and I agree. But sometimes the how do you break through that mentality where they can't connect what you're saying to the actual results that they could expect in the future? How do you break through that?
Yeah, so I think part of the problem with most people who put together, well, let me actually step back and say, in a similar note, right, we have a challenge with millennials and Zers, right? Like there's all the talk about they're not engaged at work, there's quiet quitting, they're not, connected to what's going on. And frankly, and I think the stats like, 76% of millennials and Zs care more about meaning than a paycheck. And I think the problem is we're not building meaningful companies, whether they're Zs or millennials or blue collar, quote unquote, blue collar workers. I've got
Mhm.
a number of clients who are in that space,
Mhm.
right? And so um, we're not building companies worth caring about, right? So I've got a client, breakfast shop in town, right? Six location voted best breakfast sandwich in Boston, and they had this like the question is, what are you trying leading people to? What are you trying to create? And their kind of vision statement was about a paragraph long. We want to build a great concept for food and have fun and great customers and blah, blah, blah. It's a great state of being, but you're not taking people anywhere. So I work with them on what I call the destination statement. Where are you taking people? Their destination statement right now is By the end of the decade, we want to put 10 million smiles on people's faces because breakfast can make or break your day. First of all, you see that first part is very clear. You're going somewhere, right? You're taking people to something to achieve. Secondly, this idea that we're putting smiles on people's faces because breakfast can make or break your day is something that everybody can get excited about. And the person who's making the sandwich, is making the bread, making the sausage can see what the impact of what they're doing is. I've got another client, landscaping company, who was like, "Hey, we want to transform 1,000 lawns by the end of the decade because we have the best prices, we have the best tools, we have the best people, we have the best product, and people like us." People don't buy based upon what I call feature puke, right? Like,
Yep.
at the end of the day, we still make our decisions based upon emotion, upon the most primitive part of the brain. It's a flight or flight mechanism. And I'm evaluating whether or not you're safe. And the way to drive alignment and safety is through a shared belief. Breakfast can make or break your day. This guy changed his destination statement to, we're going to transform 1,000 lawns by the end of the decade because outdoor spaces are where people connect. Again, you see how like all of a sudden there's like more, I'm not just cutting grass, I'm helping people connect.
How do you take and I agree with those changes in the destination statement are meaningful and impactful. The next step, though, is I've seen business owners, they point to their mission statement and the value statement, the destination statement, but then you ask their employees, like, what is your destination? What is the values that your company has? And they're like, well, I don't know. How do you
Yeah.
go from creating the vision and the destination and then pushing it down so that the team is buying into it? What's that process look like?
Yeah. So I was lucky enough in my first job to work for a company that had a great culture. Harvard Business School did case studies on the culture. We won awards for our culture. And 2 years ago, I put a post out on LinkedIn and said, "Have you ever worked for a company that you loved working for?" And people came out of the woodwork from 20 years ago, said, "I loved working this company, same company, and even today." And it's something, building a great culture is deliberate. It does require systems and focus. And I start everything from, okay, let's understand where we're going, what our strategy is, how we're different, and what we're uniquely focused on. But then, like things like values, right? Most people throw it on the wall and they talk about it. You've got to build that into all the processes of your systems, from how you hire to how you grow people, how you retire, how you celebrate people. And you've got to hold each other accountable. Now, most people define values that, frankly, are a little bit deflating, I call it, right? They're not stretching you to actually challenge and think about it. An example I see often that I don't love, frankly, is integrity. Like a core value should challenge you and should differentiate you and should push you to be better. If you have to push yourself to have integrity, that's an issue, and I'd run from that company,
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
So, and then you're holding people accountable. You interview people to see if they have it. You hire people and you fire people because if they have it. It's built into your review processes. It's built in your conversation. It's built into your feedback mechanisms. It's built into the DNA of the company. That's how you instill the values. Culture to me is different. Values are the people you want to hire, right? And I frankly believe that values are hard to train. You've got to find that. It's hard to change people's values. Mistake integrity, which I said wasn't a value. But the other, but like going above and beyond or looking out for others, right? Or serving others or just getting stuff done with quality, like that stuff that's hard to teach. You've got to find the people who have those qualities. You interview those for those people. That's how you find the right people and you continue to challenge them along the way. Culture is different. Culture is what the environment is like, what those people come together. What do you want the environment to be like? What do you want people to say about you on Glassdoor? What do you want people telling their friends what it's like to work there? It's fun, it's collegiate, it's challenging. We're learning together. You've got to define that too, and also build habits into your day to day that drive that culture. So again, it's intentional, but it's certainly possible. And I've seen it and done it many times.
How you start with a client, say it's three, and I agree with the 3 to 5 year time frame is ideal, that where you can actually make meaningful changes that are long lasting and will then also flow to the profit and loss statement so that a financial guy who's going to make an offer can actually calculate an offer.
Right.
Um, Changing culture is kind of, it's tangible and intangible. Like you can't, how do you get people to, there's a tangible impact of improving the culture, but changing the culture from day to day over a period of time, is kind of invisible at times. How do you go about that process to reinforce, implement the culture you want, then reinforce it so that it sticks?
Right. I think it goes back to what I was saying. It's like you only hire people based upon those values, right? And I teach my clients to do a one-on-one feedback session with their clients on a regular basis. And I've been in Fortune 100 companies, I've been in, startups, and the tool that I use is one of the best that I've seen. And it's very focused on growing that person, right? And it's also focused on the feedback on the culture. You rate yourself, an employee rates himself, and your boss rates you on how you're demonstrating that culture. More senior people are held to a higher standard. You're not just living that, but how you're holding other people accountable to, how you're teaching other people to live those core values. And then, again, you're promoting on those, you're hiring on those, you're having celebrations to recognize people for those things, right? And so that, again, it's that systemic approach to building that culture out.
So would you say a good company or a company with great culture focuses more on celebrating and rewarding positive behavior versus eliminating, cutting negative behavior or criticizing negative behavior? How do you balance? Because there, I guess the downside is there may be someone who I used to use the word there's a cancer. Sometimes you have to cut the cancer out so the rest of the body can grow. How do you balance positive reinforcement, which I am a big fan of, versus okay, we need to get rid of a negative influence.
Um, well, two things I'll say. It's a more holistic thought. Number one, most companies and most businesses are focused on using people to grow their company, right? But I think flip that. I think I like to work with people to help them use the company to grow people, right? And if you focus on understanding people and growing people, that's the first thing, right? And when you do that, you create a place that people feel loved, cared for, they have an opportunity to grow. That's what drives the growth back to the company because people are more engaged, as we talked about earlier. People are happier. We spend most of our lives there, right? So I think it starts there. Um, and I lost the question.
No, like it because sometimes I'll tell you, I was in a company and we had a culture issue. I inherited. I got hired to replace someone, and there was a negative culture. And I was trying to do without really knowing what I was doing. I was a young guy. I was 26, running a department of like 15 people. Um, and when it happened, there was this one person that everyone loved and liked. I shouldn't say loved. They liked this person, but they were always critical. They were always pushing back. They were always finding a reason not to deliver on the promises that we made as a team. And at one point, we had to just let this person go, and it was amazing. Like oh, within 2 weeks, the culture actually changed dramatically in that the one person who was kind of behind the scenes holding everyone back, being a negative governor on the culture, like kind of saying, no, let's do it this way, or this is the way we've always done it, versus trying to buy into a newer or a different way. So like, not that I think that you should always fire someone to get there, but how do you deal with, okay, there's an issue that positive reinforcement's not working. They're not buying into it. How do you either remediate that person's behavior, or and when do you decide, hey, it's time to cut bait and replace them with someone who has the values we want?
yeah. And I'm sorry, I wasn't being rude and surfing email here, but I was looking up a stat, right?
Yeah.
Because this is a stat I was looking at last night that ties exactly to this question. And this is where I was going with this. Like, you want to focus on growing people. And Jack Welch is famous for, cutting the B players all the time, right? And, I think everybody has a genius, right? And part of the problem is we put people in the wrong places. So my overall what I'm saying here is yes, you got to cut people sometimes, right? And you can't spend the worst part is oftentimes people will spend 80% of their time dealing with the lowest 20%. Unfortunately, sometimes if people aren't a good fit, you need to cut them, But my bias is towards giving really understanding people, first of all, understanding their strengths and making sure you're understanding why they may not be performing and helping
Hmm.
them succeed. Now, part of the problem there is people don't have the systems and objectivity in place to measure what does good look like. It's all subjective and how you feel and everybody else feels, da, 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 right? So what I do is help people get clear on what the expectations are by understanding and define the values and the core values and the job expectations. And then giving leaders in the organization and managing organizations that same objective measures that you're evaluating against those things so you can have objective conversations. And you can have conversations up front about how are you doing? This is what I'm seeing. How do you feel about it? And you can sometimes it's a matter of putting that person in the right role, remotivating them. But
Hmm.
at times, it is that you've got to let them go. The stat that I was looking up is that 46% of new hires fail within 18 months. And 89% of those failures are due to attitude or cultural fit, not technical skill, right? So that's again goes back to why you've got to hire and make sure you're hiring well against the culture. But yeah, that whole thing can be a cancer. I've been in that situation before myself, working for or with somebody who just isn't a good fit. And hiring up front, getting those people who are a good fit up front is probably the best thing you can do, but sometimes you can't. And you've got to go through this process of I give people the benefit of the doubt, understand strengths, weaknesses, et cetera, et cetera. And then if you have to move them out, you have a human conversation and they know it's coming because you've been open about the conversation,
Hmm.
right? Now, again, another reason that a bad hire can be so dangerous is that replacing them it costs as much between 50 to 200% of their annual salary. It is a
Hmm.
costly thing to have a bad hire, both from that like financial perspective as well as from this whole cultural impact that you just talked about and experienced.
Hmm. So we're coming up against the end of our time, and I want to. I know that you've had some success stories. I'd like you to kind of dig back into the story that you're the most proud of because of the best results. Where you started to where they ended up, so they had a successful successful
Sure.
exit.
So one of the first companies when I started consulting, I joined was a $5 million company, $5 million in revenue, and they had been stuck for a couple of years at $5 million. And I walked into the organization and I interviewed 6 people. And I asked them, what is the company trying to accomplish? What is your vision? And from those 6 people, I got 10 different answers. We want to be $100 million company. We want to build cool shit, right?
Yeah,
Sorry, just cursed. I
you
don't know if
can
you bleep
swear.
that out. There's only 10 patents in our space. We should go out and just write a bunch of patents in a room and sell those patents, right? I don't know. And this was a leadership team that I got
This
10
is the
different
rank and
answers
file. These are
from.
the people that are setting the direction.
Exactly, right? And and then I asked people, junior people, what it was like to work there. And they said, well, we get really hard stuff to do. And when we fail, we get our legs cut out from underneath of us. It's brutal. So I helped that leaders build that leadership team, right? Let's clarify where we're going, who we are, what kind of culture we want, what our plan is, and started a process of like what the cadence for planning is, and also then help build out that culture. I spent a couple years there. We got to $15 million. I left, caught up with a couple years ago with the CEO. He had sold the company for 60 million. And well, we had sold the company. I was still an owner. And but more important than that, like that's a great story, but more important than that is I caught up with one of the most junior people in the organization over coffee. And I walked in, and before I could even sit down, he looked up at me and said, I loved working there. That is still the favorite place I ever worked. And that's what I love to help create. Everything that from that value down, the strategy down to creating a place that people love and customers love. To me, that's the most rewarding thing is building that great organization.
And how long did it take you to make that transformation?
So, transformations don't happen overnight.
Right.
Entrepreneurs again want that transformation. And I think takes years, frankly, right? I was there for, working with them for 3 or 4 years, and I actually came in as a leader in the organization and help run and became the managing partner. But that took 3 or 4 years, right? And I tell most of my clients, look, expect about 2 years. The first year is you'll start to be working better together. You have better structure. You're starting to play as a team. You go back to that soccer analogy, right? You're
Hmm.
going to be playing more of that professional team because people are like you're changing the tires as you're driving down the street, right? It's a lot to make the change as well as run the company in the day to day, and you're already swamped. So that first year, you're going to have the best quarter ever. The second year is when you start to see exponential growth, right? So I would say the transformation takes 2 years, But then you have different problems to deal with. And I continue to work with my clients past those 2 years if they want to, because you've got other opportunities and challenges to keep growing.
We'll wrap it up with this. I'm a business owner. I'm doing my thing. I may be looking to leave my business in the next few years. What are some of the things? What are the top three things that they should be looking for that would indicate they need someone like you to start helping them improve their business and have it ready to either sell or transition to the next generation?
I asked them, I think one thing is, have you taken a vacation have you taken a 2 week vacation without checking your mail?
Mm-hmm.
Can you do that? Right. Then if you can't, then the business is too dependent upon you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Are you doing what you do best, what you love best? Because what I help people do is to focus on what they do best and then help find the right people who can do the things that they don't do best or they shouldn't be spending the time on.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to flip it a bit too. Like, unless you've gone through this valuation, understanding of value, you need to now, right? Value building should start the day you plant a tree, right? Yesterday, right? At a minimum, go and get educated and make an educated decision about whether or not you need help, right? So again, I mentioned earlier, I offer a 90-minute for your listeners, a 90-minute assessment of value and understanding the value, and we'll do a Zillow level valuation, which is, gonna have error, like that's not gonna be accurate. Understand that. And the other thing is like understand what you want next. Because once you can understand that, you focus on like that value of what you need in your
Mm-hmm.
pocket when you exit, all of a sudden it all becomes more clear. You have a goal, and everything else comes behind that. So I think if you don't know what we're talking about here, like you and I, we have the experience here and haven't had a conversation, somebody helps you understand your value and your needs after you sell. That's the trigger, really. Like start having that conversation, make an educated exit as soon as possible because it will change your life. Right. There's this whole part of just sitting down and understanding tax strategies, right? You're familiar probably with the 1202, and so many
Mm-hmm.
business owners don't know about the 1202, and that takes, as you know, 5 years to season, well, 3 to 5 years now, right? You know, I have a partner who's sent me a picture of one of their clients, sent me a picture of an infinity pool in Hawaii because he helped them save $5 million in taxes,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because he could write off the first, $15 million of his sale, right? So there's so much that like if people are listening and they don't know what, are not familiar with what we're talking about, just I'm glad to educate. I'm sure you are too, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the
So
whole point we're here for. Like take the time, understand and make an educated decision about your future and don't wait till the last minute and walk away with nothing.
So if someone wants to get this education, they want to figure out what their baseline value is and how close it is to what they really need. You talked about a 90-minute assessment. How would they get a hold of you to kind of schedule something like that?
Sure. They can go to my website, www.bluetidecatalyst, plural, Catayylsts, um, or they can just email me, john@bluetidecatalyst.com.
Awesome. Well, hopefully our listeners will take you up on that, or our viewers, however they listen to get their podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and talk to our audience to hopefully enlighten them and educate them. Because again, I market through education. I want people to put their best foot forward when they're ready to sell, and I know people like you help them do that. So thank you again for being a guest.
Thank you for having me. I love to help people too, so just reach out to me and glad to help.
Awesome.